opened the door and I saw these two young guys with their ties and their white shirts and their name badges. I think he said something like, have you ever thought about what makes people happy? And I was like, tell you what makes me happy is not being interrupted when I'm really busy. And then I'm afraid I F-bombed them out of the neighborhood and slammed the door. And I'd maybe gone less than 2 paces back into the house when I had the most powerful feeling that I'd made the biggest mistake of my life.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Latter-day Believers. And we've got another very special guest with us today from the UK. Across the pond over here, we have our good friend Richard, and he's super excited to share his story with us today. But before we hop into that, Richard, do you think you could just take like 30 seconds and kind of introduce yourself to our audience here?
Yeah, sure. Be a pleasure. So I'm Richard. I'm UK born and bred. I spent most of my career working in television, mainly for the BBC, a very different world. Then I moved up to Yorkshire, which is a very beautiful part of the UK. It's a very wild countryside. Think the Brontes, think things like that, you know, big hills and mountains and stuff. And it was during the pandemic. I thought, why am I living near London when I'm 3 hours away from my family? And, I thought we need to be near a family. So my wife and I came up here, and that was a great move. As well as the telly, I've written a few books, which tend to be related to TV.
Okay.
So I'm a bit of an anorak as well as a professional TV producer. But I'm kind of, sort of retired now. Obviously, I'm way too young for that. So I'm available for any interesting offers. One of the great sadnesses, although I filmed a lot in the States over the years, I never got the chance to work there like long term. But hey, you never know.
That's true. Keep that door open, right?
Always keep the doors open.
Well, that is awesome. So right now you're living like outside, like in the countryside near Yorkshire.
Yeah, my neighbors are cows and sheep and horses. And, I'm not in any way kind of like a farmer type, but I just love the peace. I feel so blessed to wake up in the morning and I see fields and I hear the occasional horse, but there's no through traffic. We have lovely neighbors here. So that's kind of, I think good neighbors are one of the secrets of a happy life. If you find a good neighbor, hold on to them.
Already sharing some wisdom. That's awesome. Good neighbors. I got to tell my roommates that.
Yeah. Roommates is a bit slightly different dynamic, isn't it, Wilson?
Just a little bit. Yeah. Well, awesome. So, Richard, if it's okay if I could switch gears here, could I just kind of ask, how did you start your conversion to Christ? Where did this all begin? Yeah, that's
an interesting one. I mean, when I was a boy, going so long time ago,
can't be too long.
There's a lot of filters on this screen. Now, back in the day, I did go to a faith school, and I was given books about Jesus Christ. I remember one called Jesus the Friend, Jesus the Helper. And they spoke to me a lot. I mean, I had a simple, accepting faith that lots of children have. And when I got to be 13 in the Church of England, I had the chance to be baptized and confirmed. And I went down that path. And confirmation in the Church of England then, it was a 13-week program. So learn over 13 weeks with a lot of immersion, because they wanted you to make the right decision for you.
Absolutely.
But I'm sad to say that fairly soon after my kind of 13th birthday, maybe, I began to kind of lose my way. And pretty quickly, I just thought, no, this isn't for me. I think one of the issues was I'd always thought of Heavenly Father as like an Old Testament figure, that he was pretty cross with you and you were doing bad things and he could see everything you did that was wrong. And so I think I got mixed up in my head and I thought, well, he's not going to be a fan of the way I carry on. So that kind of probably pushed me away a bit more. And then it has to be said that going into a career in TV, it's a pretty ungodly world. I would say the media is pretty anti-Christian, not even like on the fence. I would say you're surrounded by cynicism, very smart people, really funny, clever, witty people, but quite a lot of people who are also a bit damaged or have an agenda. And religion seems to really get it. I mean,
absolutely.
They won't dare take on some religions, but Christians are soft targets. And when you get into a church like the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, people would just look at you and roll your eyes and say, oh, it's a cult, it's weirdos, it's American, there were so many preconceptions. So how did it change? Well, I think it's a really miraculous story, because here I was in the middle, minding my own business. It was about a year ago, almost exactly a year ago.
Okay.
And I was upstairs, I was doing some work, and I heard a knock at the door, quite an insistent knock. I thought it was the postman. So I came downstairs, opened the door, and I saw these two young guys with their ties and their white shirts and their name badges. And I was really mad because I felt like I had to interrupt what I was doing. And I thought maybe they were Jehovah's Witnesses. I wasn't quite sure who I was talking to.
It's happened before. It's happened. You were not the first person to make that sort of mix up. It's all good.
So I maybe had that thought, but I was more than rude. I said, I think he said something like, have you ever thought about what makes people happy? That was his opening gambit. And I was like, tell you what makes me happy is not being interrupted when I'm really busy. And I said, you're wasting your time. I'm an atheist, which is weird because I would never describe myself as an atheist. Agnostic, but not an atheist. But I said atheist, and then I'm afraid I F-bombed them out of the neighborhood and slammed the door pretty hard.
Oh, man.
It was brutal. It was brutal. There was a lot of anger there. Anyway, here's the thing. I'd shut the door and I'd maybe gone less than 2 paces back into the house when I had the most powerful feeling that I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. And I can't describe how intense that feeling was. It was really weird. Now I would say it was the spirit. I didn't know that then. I just knew that I had this, and I was like literally stopped in my tracks. And I was like, so what do I do? I go after them. I got to go after them. And then I was like, I've got to be quick because where we live, they'll probably be in a car. They'll probably driven off. I was so hostile that if I were them, I'd have driven off quickly. And it was summer. I had sliders on. And I looked around and I just had a pair of Wellington boots because I thought I can't run up the road in sliders. So I pulled these Wellington boots on. I had shorts on. I must have looked like a real weirdo. And I went bombing up the hill. And luckily the guys were just around the corner. And I kind of thought, calm down. They'll be really freaked if you come running around the corner. They'll think you're coming for them. So I sort of stopped before they saw me and walked up and I said, guys, I was really, really rude just then. And I'd like to apologize. And you know what? If you want to come and have a chat, that's absolutely fine. And they were like, oh, okay. So we were back down to the house. And I said, would you like a cup of tea? And they said, oh, we don't drink tea. So I was like, you're not going to get anywhere in Yorkshire because in Yorkshire, people have more tea in their veins than blood. So that's a stumbling block. But anyway.
Right out of the gates, either just, no tea.
Yeah, exactly. And I just thought, I thought this is just about making amends for being so rude. But there was something in that first conversation. And I would now say that none of this was an accident at all. It turned out later that the missionaries never visited this area because it was too small a number of houses. It wasn't worth their while. And the only reason they'd come here was there'd been a stake fast that the missionaries had initiated. And it was about, gathering Israel. And they'd been with a member's family, and they'd asked one of the boys, this boy Blake, where should we go? And he chose where we live. And they were like, really? That's probably not a great place. But they'd said, we asked the boy, he said, go there. They came to where we live, and here they were. And that first lesson, they were just asking me very simple questions like, do you pray? When did you last pray? And it was interesting. I was kind of thought, I'm not going to be closed-minded. And I said to them at the end of that meeting, I'll try praying. I'll get on my knees. I haven't prayed for years. I've felt when I prayed in the past, I was talking to myself. And here we go. That night, I was on my knees. I felt a bit self-conscious, started to pray. And then I felt that I wasn't on my own. I wasn't talking to myself. I knew that I was talking to Heavenly Father. And I had this sense. And then about 3 days in, it's like I heard a voice saying to me, you've come back to me. And I say that was Jesus Christ. And I mean, how, it's not one of those things, there's a burden of proof. That's what I feel. That's what was in my heart. And so the process began of learning and kind of investigating. And what was weird to me was I looked in my diary before I knew we were going to talk today. And about 3 weeks, I'd had about three lessons. And I wrote, I really like these guys. They make a lot of sense. I'm really enjoying learning this stuff. But there is no way I will ever become a Mormon. It was like written in capitals.
There's no way. Yeah, never going to happen.
That is not happening. And I don't know whether it was because I think I was a bit self-conscious, because, you have to have humility. If you're going to accept Christ in your life, if you're going to convert to Christ, if you're going to join a church like the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is not in any way a passive church, right?
No shot.
No. I didn't know that for a while. As soon as when I began to find out what was required, what was expected of the average member, things like callings, things like the fact that the church is essentially run by everybody who's in the church. It's not like a career. It's not like a career. So I guess I was feeling self-conscious. Like I didn't tell my wife for the first 3 weeks that I was having lessons. I arranged them when she wasn't going to be around. I certainly didn't tell friends or family because I just knew what the reaction would be. And indeed, although actually I would say I've been surprised by how supportive people have been, there have definitely been one or two people who are so weirded out by it. And sadly, one of them is like my best mate. And he's just like, you're going to hell and I'm going to be burning right next to you. And I was like, yeah, maybe, but you know what? There's always hope that maybe that isn't what's going to happen. Maybe the things that I've done that are bad are not that bad. And so it was kind of a massive accelerated journey because I never felt safe during the course of that summer. Okay. I felt like all the time I was on the edge of a precipice. And if I talk about a good fear, does that make sense to you?
A good fear. It does. It really does.
Where you go into you're in an uncomfortable space, because this stuff is so fundamental that if you're going to, I knew that I could either stop it and say it's too much for me or pause it, and I never at any moment did I feel pressurized. Yeah. Like people talk about, I had people saying to me, oh, it's like pyramid selling. It's like, it's like a cult. It's like this. I said, I have not had any, the very fact that the church celebrates agency, once you explain to people that agency is fully respected, it kind of obliterates all those arguments, doesn't it?
Blows it out of the water. Like, absolutely. Yeah.
And I love, so one of the things I very, very quickly focused in on when I was talking to the missionaries was accountability. To me, maybe one of the reasons why I'd felt excluded from the Church of England, and my wife's a member of the Church of England. She's always had a faith and been very involved in her church and stuff. And I used to talk about God botherers. I said, I don't think God botherers. Oh, they mean well, but they're so boring. They're always like, so pious and all this stuff. And I think as well, I had friends who were Catholics. And I quite liked all the drama of the Catholic faith, the smells and bells and the beautiful cathedrals and the lovely music. But I always felt it was theatre. It didn't feel like it was part of real life. So again, when I first went to church, the invitation came, come to church. And I was thinking, oh, really? 2 hours on a Sunday morning? And it's like, and someone said to me, you're lucky. It used to be 3 hours.
Oh, it's so true. It's so true.
Yeah, and it kind of is 3 hours if you get there half an hour early and you stay half an hour afterwards.
Well, of course, yeah. You've got your mingle, right? Like
absolutely. And so here's the thing. I was going to church with low expectations, but I walked into that church and I just felt a sense of calm and peace and belonging. I loved the fact that the families everywhere with little kids running up and down, and then people walking with sticks. I'm sadly nearer that end than I am the toddlers running around. But I felt really strongly that, this is so inclusive. And there's a honeymoon period, right? There's always,
of course.
If you're coming into a church that you don't know about, you're probably focusing more on the things that that speak to you and make you feel comfortable. I mean, I did have one hiccup. The first Sunday, I have a phobia of being late. So I arrived maybe 40 minutes before the start.
Oh my gosh.
Exactly. Eldest Forum wasn't going to kick off till 10. So I was in the foyer and I was minding my own business thinking, come on, missionaries, where are you? And I noticed that the elders tend to get there later than the sister missionaries. But I parked that judgment out. Anyway, I was there and this guy came up to me and I swear he got this close to my face and he went, hello. He said, you're new, aren't you? And I was thinking in my head, this is everything I feared would happen. And I was like backing into a corner, virtually climbing into a potted palm behind me. And this guy and then I suddenly thought, maybe he's a bit deaf. And I've subsequently found out he is a bit deaf and he's a bit on the spectrum. And you know what? I also had the thought, get over yourself. So I can't tell you how many times during this process I have had that moment. Again, I say it's the Spirit saying, get over yourself. Wow. Stop putting yourself in the front of the shop window and saying it's all about you. It is. And that, in a weird way, is such a release. It brings you so much more peace to realize you're this important in the overall scheme of things. You have your part to play and, you are important in lots of ways, but in the way that modern society and the world that I worked in was very much focused on you do you.
Oh, absolutely.
You do you.
Absolutely.
And not any concept of service or thought about people beyond the people you want to be. But we can all choose our friends, but it gets tougher, doesn't it, when you've got to show love for people who are maybe not the kind of people you'd want to hang out with.
Absolutely.
And I began to make changes. I thought, how can I do this? Can I obey the word of wisdom? So I was having 5 cups of tea and maybe a couple of cups of coffee a day as standard.
Absolutely. That's standard in Europe. I live in Sweden. I know how it goes.
Yeah. So I thought, I'm cutting it off cold turkey. Again, didn't tell my wife for a bit. And couldn't work out why I was having such fierce headaches for the first 3 days. So that tells you there's something going on that's probably a sign it's not a bad idea. And a lovely member said to me, if you're really missing coffee, there's this stuff called Caro. I'll get you some Caro. And I think I'm still, trying to make a go of herbal tea. I don't really like herbal tea much.
Yeah.
But you say in the States, herbal tea. But you know what? Again, I think I'm lucky that I'd never done drugs, don't smoke. I'd already kind of given up alcohol. Yeah. So I felt like, how hard is it got to be to give up hot drinks, It's about obedience. And that's what it's, because people were saying to me, my wife said to me, I don't think Heavenly Father cares if you have a cup of tea. And I said, you know what? Maybe he doesn't, but I think he does care about obedience. And there were so many lessons like that. I go to a gym and I work with a trainer because if I don't work with a trainer, I wouldn't turn up. It's like I'm paying
accountability. Exactly.
Yep, so,
I get it.
He said to me after about a couple of weeks last summer, he said, something really weird's happened with you. And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, you stopped swearing. He said, you used to be not only the sweariest person in the gym, it was like punctuation. He said that to such an extent that we were going to warn you that, wasn't appropriate because there were old ladies in the corner or people, and we were saying you're swearing. It's off the chart. And suddenly it stopped. And so that prompted me to start telling him why. And he was like, he's only 23 and he's a professional rugby league player and very northern, down to earth. But, weirdly, I mean, he makes fun and all the rest of it. But after a bit, he was like, oh, I know, I respect this. I respect the fact that there is discipline, there is accountability. And, within discipline, there comes a certain degree of freedom because actually you realize most of the things you're being asked not to do and most of the things you're being asked to do benefit you. You may not always feel that way, but that is so what happens. I've known more fear since I've joined the church than I think I've come back to fear because, it's like every week it's like, oh, you're going to be, after you get baptized. So for me, the moment of baptism was like really joyful. And I was
absolutely
so blessed. For me, you guys who've grown up in the church and you're baptized when you're 8. So recently I was talking to some of the young men in the church and I was asking them what they remembered of their baptism. And most of them couldn't really remember much, except that mom loved the way they looked in white and took loads of pictures of them. And maybe there was a bit of a party afterwards and so on. But I think to be 57 and to know why it is, clearly why you are making that decision and making that covenant and beginning that path. You know, I felt like I couldn't get baptized till I'd read the Book of Mormon. When I was first given the Book of Mormon, I was like, this is going to be the deal breaker because I'm going to read it and think it's baloney. And I'm just going to, I'm literally going to think, I'd heard about the musical, I was thinking,
of course,
I came into it with this jaded view, but it's so weird, or maybe it's not weird. But once I started reading it, I was like, there's no way that this is A, a fake, or B, the most amazing piece of scripture that I didn't know existed. And, so I kind of raced through it. I didn't understand all of it. And I thought, I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to get bogged down. If I get to Isaiah or somewhere, a bit that's maybe, scrambling my brain a bit, I'm just going to move through it because I know I'll come back.
Yeah.
So that was really important.
It's a great approach.
Also, having a testimony of Joseph Smith, because I think if you're going to join the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and you basically don't get the idea of a living prophet and how that started and what Joseph Smith went through to, so when people say to me, oh, he was just a fraud, he made it all up. And I was like, a farm worker with scarcely any education made up this stuff to make his life really hard and eventually to end his life. None of that makes any sense.
Zero sense whatsoever.
0 sense. So and friends of mine in the church gave me the first volume of the church history, which is like that big.
Is it like Saints Volume 1? Okay,
that's the one. And it's brilliant. It's really well written. It's
absolutely.
Really amazing. And I kind of raced through that like a hot knife through butter because I thought it was like reading a movie script.
It's fantastic. It's so engaging.
It's so engaging, and the characters come out so vividly. And you think, for me, it wasn't just the prophets and the leaders of the church. It was their wives. It was their families. It was the people who made it possible for them to do those incredible things and undertake those journeys and make those sacrifices. So again, that's helpful when you're entering the church because you're thinking, well, no one's asking me to put all my worldly goods in a wagon and risk not just my life, but the life of my family. And, those sort of things. So that was kind of helpful. So by the time I got baptized, I felt really ready for it. I was baptized in September. It was fantastic because loads of family and friends came with no judgment.
That's awesome.
Nobody was there with an eyebrow raised or, being cynical. And to be honest, I was always the cynical one, the sarcastic one. So they could have been forgiven for, payback, a bit of revenge, and then my, first trip to the temple to do proxy baptisms. Again, all of that stuff making total sense to me. At every point where I thought, oh, this will be the hurdle. This will be the bit that I think, okay, I found out this church, it's not working. It's not to say that I don't think it's possible for any of us probably to be completely in line with every tenet of the church because we're so different. The world is so diverse. We've all got different stuff going on. I'm very, I grew up in a very progressive environment. So, my attitude, like my best mate who's gay, has been married for 20 years. And he said to me, what does this mean? Do you mean you don't approve of me anymore? You don't? I said, of course not. I love you like a brother. My feelings are not changed in any way to you. And I don't have, it's not for me to judge you or judge your life choices or any of that stuff. But, I think I kept going back to talks by Elder Bednar. Elder Bednar is one of my heroes.
Absolutely.
So how do you find him? I find him, he's a tough customer, right?
I'd say he's probably the most intimidating of the 12 apostles. Like maybe that's just me, but
no, it's not just you. Like I listened to podcasts with him and he was talking to some youth in one of them. And he'd ask them a question. They'd ask him a question. Then he'd come back with them and say, how has that increased your understanding of what charity means? And you could hear a gulp, literally like a cartoon gulp. as this poor 17-year-old tries to find the words, and he's like thinking, please can the Spirit be with me to unlock my brain,
Open your mouth and it shall be filled, right? Hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. So Elder Bednar is like, I think he's like such a hero to me, because going back to accountability, he doesn't dress things up very much. He's quite firm, he's quite tough. And there was one talk he gave in particular, I think he gave it to BYU, and it wasn't a general conference talk. And you may remember it, because I think it's quite well known. And he's basically talking about, he says, quit worrying about it.
Oh, I love that one.
He's taking, be a good boy, be a good girl, honor your covenants, and I was just like, this is so right. All the other noise, because the more you think about stuff, you overthink.
Absolutely.
You can your head can just get so full, and you feel like you're going a bit insane. And that was happening a lot because I was so immersed in the church. And then I was thinking, no, he's right. Take a breath, be a good boy, honor your covenants, keep going in faith, and keep to those basic things. Do you believe that Joseph Smith was a prophet? Do you believe that the Book of Mormon, all of those things? And I knew in my heart that I could answer yes, yes, yes. And that was just like such a brilliant blessing to have.
Absolutely. And like, I love that, like, as we do that, Elder Bednar promises, like, things are going to work out. As long as you're honoring your covenants, God's not just going to abandon you and just let you fall to the wayside. Things are going to work out and it's going to be okay. Just try your best. I love that insight.
And I think trying your best, I mean, like praying, I remember being told, like pray, don't just pray at the end of the day, pray whenever you feel like you want to do that, to go there. So I began to kind of tentatively try to pray when I was driving in the car instead of shouting at other drivers. Because living in the countryside, you get stuck behind tractors and horses and cyclists, and old me would be turning the air blue. Now, it's not to say that old me isn't still there. The natural man is a very powerful and kind of wild force, but sometimes it's like you're given these blessings. So you're given access to a toolkit that you can use. You have to work out how to use it. So I was thinking, no, I go into it. I'm gonna talk to Heavenly Father. I mean, Heavenly Father's probably thinking, not you again, like with your road rage. But my bishop is a wonderful man who just generates love. Like, he's an amazing man. He's a proper Yorkshireman, very down to earth, used to be a rugby player. There's no nonsense. But I just know, when you meet people and you know that they're completely genuine. And so his support, his kind of gentle background guidance, because, it's like when you convert to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, you definitely have that period where everyone's making a fuss of you because you're the new guy, and everyone's love bombing you, and they're inviting you around, and they're doing it, which is great because luckily we're quite social, so we love the LDS.
That's awesome.
Mission of having people. We did a Thanksgiving party for the missionaries, and loads of people from
I'm sure that made their day. Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Amazing because of the connections. And we had some of our neighbors who were not church members and so on. So there are loads of many benefits. But I think once you get past that, you're then going to work out what's real life. What's real life in this church going to be like? Once you're no longer the buzz because you're the new guy and all the rest of it. And people, not everyone's going to be your best mate. Sometimes you might be sitting there in Sunday school and you might have your little opinion and you might be thinking someone's rolling their eyes over there and thinking, what does he know? But I have to tell you, Wilson, my most favorite ever, there's a lovely guy in our ward, and he's been a faithful member all his life. But he's very dry, proper Yorkshireman. And we were talking about the prodigal son.
Okay.
And he was saying that he could really relate to how the older son felt, having been the good, dutiful, diligent one. He said, I was born into the church. I've honored my covenants. I've stayed righteous. I served a mission. I've done everything I've been expected to do all through my life. And Richard here has had the rock and roll lifestyle, done everything he wants to do, caroused, drunk, swore, do whatever he wants. And now he's like the prodigal son, right? He's come back. I I was so interested that everybody laughed, but I was like, you're so right. But here's the thing you're missing, is that in all those years where I was doing that stuff, I tell you, I went through a lot of wrong doors and did a lot of stuff that was painful, not just to me, but to other people. So the prodigal son is a brilliant, brilliant story because
it's beautiful.
It's so true. Because the truth is, the grass is always greener. He could be looking at people and thinking, oh, I'd love to just have a week where I could live the rock and roll lifestyle and sex, drugs, rock and roll, all the rest of it, alcohol, fast cars, loose women, whatever. But the truth is, most people who have those experiences, I think there's a massive price to pay.
Absolutely.
And I have a lot of stuff that I look back and I just wish, it's no point having these wishes. It's pointless. But if I were to have a wish, it would be that that I had found the church, or the church had found me a lot younger, because it would have helped me avoid so many mistakes and so much pain and so much heartache. And, that really made me think that.
And I think as well, at the same time, like in that prodigal son kind of allegory that we're using, the older brother never saw the younger brother when he was with the pigs, when he was literally eating out of their troughs, right?
Exactly.
All he imagined is, oh, he had this great life, just spending all this money doing whatever he wanted. But he didn't see just where that led him. He didn't experience that pain. So at the same time, it's almost a little short-sighted to recognize that. It's not recognize how blessed he has been and how safe he's been that whole time.
Absolutely right. I mean, I think he did get that, but it was all quite humorous and lighthearted.
Of course.
But I think he was making a good point, that it's very easy to lose sight of the blessings of leading a covenant life. And like I only very recently I was ordained into the Melchizedek priesthood, and I had my interview with my stake president, and he's a man I hugely admire, incredible guy. Has had a lot to deal with in his life, and he is just like an icon of how, despite dealing with all sorts of stuff in his life, his love for everybody else, his duty of care, and his intelligence, having a conversation with him is more than a game of tennis. You can't just bluff it. And I feel like, I don't know other people's experiences, because obviously these are all callings. So this is what amazes me, that no one is given kind of training. I mean, I suppose you grew up in the church, but actually a lot of the time you're trusting to the fact that, you are going to be prompted by the Spirit. You're going to be given revelation. You're going to be given that guidance that you need to direct and steer so many people, and all these people with different stuff going on, real major stuff sometimes that bishops and stake presidents have to deal with. So I feel like I haven't given them too much to worry about yet. But I love how it wasn't just like, it's time for you to do the Melchizedek priesthood now. Off you go, tick that box.
Check it off.
Yeah, exactly. For me, it was like I was questioning, am I ready yet? It's quite soon. And then I was thinking, there's another side of me that's banging on the door going, yes, I want this. I want to be, I want to move forward. And a lot of that was prompted by the fact that I've had 2 temple trips doing proxy baptisms. My first calling is working with the young men. So going with them and being in that environment, that sacred environment, but also how incredibly moving it is to see the effect on them. To have like a 14-year-old boy say to me, tonight was the first time I truly felt the Spirit. And you just think, that's amazing. And so I'm eager to get to the next stage and actually, get to the temple and commit further and get further on my covenant path. And, I think I would be worried if I didn't feel like that. If I got to this point and was thinking, oh, do you know what? I'm okay. I'm coasting along here. It's all good, but there's always something else, isn't there?
Oh, I don't always.
And this is why I'm going to give you some love now. Saints Unscriptured to me, which was very important part of my investigating time, because, in these bite-sized chunks with a lot of energy and a lot of content in a short space of time, covering, literally that one chocolate box thing. You could go down and say, oh, I want to know a bit more about the priesthood. I want to know, somebody's, what do you say when someone takes you on about Joseph Smith? You go through all these things, and it's a brilliant way of using modern tech and modern media But also what it does is it reminds you of just how rich life in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is. Yeah, there are hurdles. There are tough things you're asked to do, for sure. But I mean, the returns, the rewards, and the love of the fact that we live with the love of Jesus Christ in our lives, and that constant sense of the power of the atonement, and the sense of hope, not just for us, because we're all like, oh, we want hope, but you want it for the people you love, right, as well.
So true.
And I think that it's really interesting to me because I think about the generations that have gone before. My son died when he was 14, which was the biggest tragedy of our lives.
I'm so sorry.
And, it's like there's this phrase people will say, they put it on cards sometimes, there are no words. And in some cases, there almost are no words because it's impossible to even begin to unpack what that does to a family and what that means if you're a parent. And, he was a lovely, lovely boy and very intelligent, loads of friends, all of that. And so inevitably you reflect a lot. So one of the things that probably was also going on with me was a lot of anger. And my wife kept her faith and quietly in her way, I think it gave her some comfort and the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
But now, when you think about how short mortal life is and how mortal life is full of traps and perils, we think we can hold it back. I go to the gym. I think, oh, yeah, I'm going to not be that guy that loses it completely. I still want to vaguely catch a ball or whatever. And that's better than the opposite, sitting on a sofa and eating biscuits.
True.
But you look around you and you think you have no idea most of the time what's going on in the lives of those people. So when I go to my ward, because we have 2 wards that use the same church, there's a lot of people there on a Sunday. And I quite often have that thought, you don't know what he or she is dealing with, and all the rest of it. But I know that the plan of salvation, the sense of hope that you can get from understanding your part in that, well, tiny part, but you're still important, is really essential. And I'm always wary. I'd thought about whether I should even tell you that, because I thought, oh, I don't want people to have that judgment where they think, oh, he's had this terrible tragedy, and so he's turned to God. In fact, that used to be one of the things I used to go, well, that's not happening with me. No way. I'm not going to make it God's responsibility to pick me up off the floor. I'm on my own. I've got to do this by myself. And that's crazy because, being on your own is not the right state for most humans. You can be shy, you can want time on your own, but basically we're a tribal, we're a community.
It's true. We're social creatures at the end of the day.
We're social creatures. Even when you read the Book of Mormon and you think they're getting a bit stiff-necked or a bit full of themselves, you can so vividly picture modern society. You go out to a shopping mall now and you look around you and you think 2,000 years hasn't made that much difference. So we sort of do our thing, don't we? But I think that the great thing about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the way that the doctrine works, the scriptures work, is it constantly reminds us to think outward, to connect with other people,
absolutely,
to find that space in your life so that it's not just about you and your stuff. And as soon as you do that, things get better.
It's so true. Like the moment that we begin to think outside of ourselves and focus on God, focus on our covenants and that connection, I noticed the exact same thing. There's such an improvement that comes into our lives. And I think...
Although, go on, you finish what you were saying, Wilson.
Oh, no, please, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say, so my calling is working as an advisor to the young men, right? It's a great calling because, there's nothing like, I was so scared the first Sunday I had to teach because I was just thinking these boys have grown up in the church and they're going to look at me and they're going to think, what's he know about anything? And I was thinking, what do I know about anything? It's like, even though you've got come follow me to help you and also, you've still got to find a way, and you've got to sort of also trust the Spirit. You've got to, you've got to kind of go with the flow. But with those boys, who are on a Sunday morning, they're 16, 17, pretty much this will be what they're like.
Sounds about right.
And I was like saying, I got through my first lesson and it felt like it went quite well. And at the end, we were talking about temptation and we were talking about prayer. And I said, when do you guys pray? When's your time for prayer? And they were basically saying that they didn't pray very much and that they found it quite embarrassing or quite they were obviously quite self-conscious about even talking about prayer.
Yeah.
And so I was like a bit thrown by this, because I was like, well, prayer is, to me, is like the fundamental.
It's pretty foundational. Yeah, I would agree.
And I was going, guys, the more you cut yourself off from that, the more you're going to struggle in loads of other ways, right? It's always like the thing to hold on to, even if you're not reading scripture, even if you're not, whatever. Anyway, but then I thought, hang on a minute. These boys are here. They're actually here. They may be partly because the family has support, but they're still here. And they're in and so I said to them, I don't want you to dig you out about this stuff, because I'm really impressed that at your age, and I remember what I was like at your age, the fact that you're here week in, week out, you're doing your priesthood duties in sacrament, you're turning up to activities every Thursday, and like, you might one week, some boys love volleyball or whatever, some boys hate it. Some boys, we did one week where my wife showed them how to make a cushion, and at the beginning, when they walked in, I tell you, there were faces like smacked, By the end, they loved it, because they proved they can make this thing, and it was fantastic. It was transformational.
Awesome.
I mean, that's all my wife. That's what I do with me. But I loved how, because she's chosen, masculine fabrics and stuff. But it was the process of them sewing and putting it together, and they suddenly realized, well, we can do this stuff. We're capable. We're not. So many times young people get written off. Wilson, I don't know how it was for you in high school and stuff, but a lot of the time, being that age is about being constantly told you're old enough to know better, you're grown up now, or you're nearly a man. But alongside that, you're still being treated like a child a lot of the time. So it's trying to find that balance where you're actually trusting them and saying, yeah, you are nearly an adult, and so I trust you that you're going to do this and you're going to do this, and we've always got the support, we've always got your back, but you've got to go out there now and start to lead your independent life. So it's a great calling, because it's fascinating to see all that stuff going on.
Absolutely. The young men sound pretty lucky to have you as an advisor.
I don't know about that. Yeah, well, cool to them.
Well, Richard, as we kind of wrap up here, first off, thanks so much for what you've been able to share. I love your mature perspective on the gospel. I think it's something that's been very unique for me to hear. And I think another thing that's kind of unique that maybe not all of our viewers can relate to is being in Europe. So like I kind of mentioned earlier, I served my mission in Sweden, and so I understand culturally how religion is kind of perceived in Europe, at least how it was in Sweden. I'm assuming it's fairly similar in England.
Yeah.
But how has that adjustment been for you of becoming a member of the church, of like entering to this culture that's so different from the world that you're used to? How has that adjustment been?
I found it fascinating, because initially there was definitely fear and awkwardness around, how was some of my oldest friends going to judge me and all the rest of it. And then I think it was a mistake present. I was talking to him because he'd had family members leave the church.
Okay.
And he said, it's not so different. When that happens, you have to find out the way of saying, we still have a lot in common. We still love each other. We still respect each other. Again, respecting agency is important, but that cuts both ways. So what I have done is, where I've had people who have been consistently aggressive, or, just wanting to dig me out, wanting to, I had one friend who just kept sending me negative headlines about the church or whatever.
Okay.
And, provocation. And I said to that friend, if you ever want to have a real conversation, like I can really tell you from my heart why I've joined the church, what I feel about the church. I'm not here to tell you it's perfect, because we're full of humans, and humans are not perfect. But I'm not going to engage. You have to have a boundary around some stuff to protect you, and also to protect your testimony. So you, as David Bednar would say, you quit worrying about it, and also quit making excuses. It's like, I also did that thing where I would sometimes not say something if I was in company where people were being, saying stuff that I wasn't really comfortable with. Now I think I'm more confident not to be the kind of prissy bloke in the corner who goes, could you all stop? But I would know what to do. I might just remove myself from the situation. But I think we have to take responsibility for, what we watch, what we listen to, who we
Absolutely.
spend time with. And that can sometimes mean going against the peer pressure. And I'm here to tell you, the peer pressure is fierce when you're young, when you're like your age, but it's still there when you're older.
Hmm.
And you've just got to find your way and think, all of us have. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints makes it clear to all of us that even if we're not serving a mission or we're not actively engaged, we are still effectively all serving a mission. We are
Absolutely.
still there to share our testimony, and sharing your testimony in a simple, honest, pure way is probably the most effective way of shutting down the worst opposition, because no one can argue with sincerity.
It's true. It's your own personal experience.
Exactly. And if you feel it, and if they've got any glimmer of respect or affection or love for you, then even if they don't get it and they're not going to share it, that will be, okay, we get it. We respect you for that. And we'll move. I mean, it's frustrating, right? Because maybe because I've discovered so much, so many positives.
Mm-hmm.
I want to share that. I want other people to have that. I can understand now why.
Of course.
What is the point of spending 2 years of your life going around knocking doors, doing all that stuff? It's because you want other people to have that opportunity. And I feel that so strongly. So, I have what I call missionary envy, because, I'm not ever going to be able to do 2 years as a young missionary. And, my wife says, it's convenient that you've not got to, but actually that would have been amazing for me at that point in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I think all the sacrifices that you guys make when you go on missions and the rest of it, I think the blessings that you get in return, the foundation of the life that is then yours afterwards, to me is amazing. I love that. And I've become friends with some senior missionaries from Utah who are over here
Mm-hmm.
doing, they're working in the church now. And we met at the pageant and we hit it off, and we've met friends of theirs. They were here on Sunday. And suddenly I feel like I need to go to Salt Lake really badly. But that's just a wonderful thing. It opens doors, and you realize, even though some people have very different life experiences, that we are all brought together by Jesus Christ and our love of our Savior.
That's the beautiful thing. Christ, he gathers, and Satan, he wants to separate us. But that's the beautiful part of the church. So
and that's why we're talking today.
Exactly. Look at this. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And if I just have one last question, Richard, if you were to talk to somebody who was in the middle of investigating the church right now, they're kind of in their own process of conversion, what would you say to them?
I would say two things. I would say, don't get distracted by all the noise. Stick to the clarity of the things that most speak to you and speak to you powerfully. So what that's really about is finding your testimony and holding on to it and not getting distracted. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing, which was a great piece of advice I got from one of the missionaries, he just said to me one day, "Where's your sacred space?" And I was like, "What?" And he said, "Where's your place you go to?" And I was like, I hadn't even thought of it like that. And I thought that's a brilliant idea, to find a space mm-hmm. where you can go, where you can feel close to Heavenly Father, where you can pray, where you can be still, where you can be quiet. I mean, it's easier in the countryside, but I think that can be in a room, that can be in a car, that can be, you find your sacred space. And again, it's about shutting out all the distractions, because, Satan's going to work hard to stop you joining the church, right?
Absolutely.
And in the world we're in now, I would say the adversary has got more tools at their disposal to make you feel ridiculous, to make you feel like you can't commit to this, because of that, because of the other, when the reality is that's the thing you need to shut down and go back to. What is your heart telling you? Go with that, find that testimony, hold on to it. It's like literally holding on to that rod mm-hmm. and not letting go. And that's the brilliant thing about the Book of Mormon, is that it puts into the words picture so many of the situations we find ourselves in. And I would say also read the children's version if you're struggling with sometimes I would go and look at the picture stories or watch the video. Because it's like, don't shut yourself out of the scriptures because you can't cope with the long words.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Well,
so that's quite a lot. That's a long answer, but I think it all boils down to, trust your instincts and try not to get distracted by all the noise and the distraction.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. And just thank you so much for coming on the show today. I've learned a lot and I felt the spirit.
I did too. And it was absolutely an honor to be here, Wilson. Thank you so much.
If you would like to see more of these sorts of videos, we have a playlist of all these conversion stories are going to be assembling. So be sure to check that out. So thanks for watching today, and we'll see you guys next time.